things. Like me, for example,
Beatbreak 87 FM and Reach One Network proudly presents Love and Poetry Podcast with your host, Sean Garvey and Sha'ria Thomas. Sha'ria Thomas, hello there.
Good afternoon, Sean. How are you this evening?
I am doing great. Good evening to you and yours as well. I am very happy that you are back for episode 3. How
Me
was your
too.
week?
Yeah, I missed you. I actually headed out of town just for a brief little overnight. I had to handle some music business. So I'm back.
Okay. There's nothing wrong with that. You are an entrepreneur in your own right. And of course, music is another passion of yours outside of what we're doing and other things that you have got going on. So we're definitely looking forward to some great things and some great music coming out of you in
Thank you.
2021. Just to give our listening audience a recap of episode 2, we had a great time. I myself had an opportunity to talk to podcaster, a fellow podcaster of mine, DJ Robinson. In episode 2, we talked about what in the dating app is going on. A very interesting conversation surrounding today's technology as it pertains to technology. And we had a lot to talk about,
I
Sha'ria.
could
We had a lot to talk
imagine.
about.
Man, I missed it.
Yeah,
But I heard the replay, and I'm going to listen to it again. So,
absolutely.
yes.
Yeah, and in case you missed it, we have it online available for you and yours on demand at beatbreakradiofm.com and all your streaming services, including, I was about to say Netflix and Hulu for a minute there.
Uh-oh.
But hopefully soon we'll
Not
be on
yet.
Netflix and Hulu.
Right.
But Spotify, iHeart, Podcast, Google Podcasts, and wherever you get your app, especially on the Podcast FM app, you can listen to episode 2 of Love and Poetry Podcast on demand and it'll be ready for you. We have 2 special guests joining with us on the Love and Poetry Podcast, and I am so honored to have these 2 people on the podcast. We've been talking about it. We talked a little bit about it on the last episode of Love and Poetry Podcast.
Yeah.
And me and Sha'ria talked about doing this offline. And I'm just so happy to bring these 2 people on. And I'm going to let Sha'ria have the floor as she introduced these 2 people, these 2 people on the podcast. Have you ever seen Black Love? I think it's Black Love.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the series Black Love, which highlights Black couples from the entertainment industry to just your regular people,
Right.
talking about giving their testimony of how marriage life has been to them.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very great show on OWN. That's Oprah Winfrey's network. I watched a little bit of it before coming on the podcast today, and it just gave me some insight as a single man in America. It just gave me a lot of information and insight on the journey of being married. So we're going to go ahead and have Sha'ria's guests unmute themselves so they can introduce themselves. And I'm going to let Sha'ria have the floor.
Yes, most definitely. So I would love to introduce, and I'm very honored to have my own parents who are a testament and a prime example of what I see as the essential of strength, love, commitment, and understanding when it comes to demonstrating and bringing up a family with love through a committed marriage. And so they demonstrated that to me. And I'm so thankful that today here on Love and Poetry, that we can give to our listening audience information, even some hopefully inspiration for couples from dating on to newlyweds to the longevity of the marriage that my parents have had has been over 50 years. And let them tell you the actual years they have been married, but it's been over 50 years. So can you imagine, to actually live and bond and grow and evolve with another person? So I finally introduced my parents Mr. and Mrs. James and Sharon Blackmon. Yes, yes. Welcome to the show, Mommy and Daddy. I will not be calling you Mr. and Mrs. Blackmon. You are my mom and dad, and I'm so glad that you made it.
Mhm.
So we just want to start off. I know I want to start off, and because when we talk about this thing called love, marriage, relationships, um, of course, you all are the epitome that demonstrated what a healthy relationship looks like, even when in conflict. So I want you all to tell us and just start with first, how long have you been married? And tell us a little bit about your love story of how you fell in love and how you decided to get married.
Thank you for inviting us, Zuleika. Your daddy and I, as you know, have been married 58 years. And with marriage, whether you were married 2 years or 58 years, it takes patience and forgiveness.
Mm-hmm.
You must be patient when you're young, and you must be patient when you're our age. And you must be committed, and you must have love, because when we don't get along, well, that erodes the love. And next thing you know, people, there's problems. But we have to be patient with one another. And okay. Now, my husband, he can tell you how he sees it.
Yes.
Well,
Different perspective, female and male perspective.
yeah, we will. Yeah, we'll stay in tune. We'll be in the same tune that your mother expressed. I want to thank you for allowing us to come on. It is true that I believe in marriage. I always have believed in marriage. I took it on at a very young age. Your mother said it was 58 years ago. Your mother was 15 years old when I met her.
Wow.
And I was 19. And yet we were two souls searching for love and searching for understanding in life as well. So with that journey that we went through, we made it. God has allowed us, as all human beings, man and woman, to mate. And I believe about mating, it must be an honest commitment and a sincere commitment for one another in order for that marriage, that mate, take place and hold together. Yes, we have to find consideration. We have to have patience. But at the same time, we must respect the boundaries of man and woman. I believe about that. And God has told us, all of those who believe in God, and I believe the world do, people do in general, that we have roles. Male has roles, female has roles.
Right.
It doesn't say that one is unequal or superior to the other. It only means that we're not the same in our roles.
Yes.
We cannot cross over. So that's what I mean by roles. And that is that in connecting with one another, we have to be respectful to the freedoms of that individual. And so I believe about that, even though we have our challenges and we have our debates and we have our parts of heated argument, we must still be able to pull back and find a mutual barrier or area where we can come together again and understand. So I thank you for bringing us on. That is one of the things I wanted to share with everyone, was the fact that we are two souls that God has put here in life for us to find ourselves, develop as well, and to share together in love with one another. And that's what I I am your mother. We love one another. That's the basic part,
Oh, yes.
a base, our
Yes.
fundamental basis.
Most definitely. And that was always demonstrated and felt and experienced as me growing up as a child. I want to lead out and I want to give Sean an opportunity, but just from what you all said as it relates to the foundation, it's what I hear in terms of a marriage. And of course, it's starting as that journeying together, building together in the desire to love one another, but knowing that this is a journey in life, that you're journeying in life. And Daddy, you brought up some good points in terms of boundaries, that there might even be conflicts, but you all are still able to move through them. So just tell us a little bit more about even what, and I'd like to hear from you too, Mommy, just as it relates to what do you see as, and again, forgiveness, that was something in the past that even in my own marriage, when I was married, that was something that you instilled in me and told me that was important. But as you look at factors that are important to a successful marriage for you and Daddy, what would you say are some personal factors that you see as important to success, to having a successful marriage?
Faith in God,
Mm-hmm.
because you will need to call on your creator during your marriage.
Yeah.
There will be things that even though you love one another, you must call on our creator. You must.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Creator first.
Most definitely. So having that foundation and strength within, first individually, and of course in connection with each other. I guess just tell us a little bit about even how that developed as your faith individually in the marriage, as well as bonding on the importance of having faith and sustaining that within your marriage.
Well, like your daddy said, I was 15,
Mm-hmm.
he was 19, and we made eye contact. And there was just something there.
Yeah.
And I had so many questions because I was raised by good Christian people, good, my grandmother, my father, avid Bible readers.
Mm-hmm.
But I had some questions that they couldn't answer. And I had heard so much. And I had heard that there was a God by the name of Allah. And when I asked my parents about this, they wouldn't hear this. They didn't want to hear this. They said, we taught you that Jesus is God. And we know there's only one God.
Mm-hmm.
People call our creator by many different names,
Mm-hmm.
but there's only one God. So whatever you call it, the name of your creator, still the same, there's only one God.
Mm-hmm.
So the first time that I talked to him in a conversation, he told me that he believed that Allah was God. And my heart started racing. I said, oh, I like him. We can talk.
Mm-hmm.
Then, and within about a month and a half of our relationship, he told me that he would marry me. He was marrying me. And I was excited because I wanted him to ask Daddy right away. But I wasn't supposed to have a boyfriend.
Fast.
So I went to your grandmother, and I told her that I like Jimmy. She had met him. She knew his brother because his brother, your Uncle Raymond,
yeah,
and your daddy, and my brother Gene. Well, they, your daddy, my brother Gene knew your daddy, but they weren't friends, but they just knew each other. He was friends with your Uncle Raymond. So I told her, she liked Raymond, right? And then I told her, and then she said, well, your daddy said you had to be 18. And I said, but I guess she seen the sincerity in my eyes, and she said, okay, tell him to be here an hour before your daddy comes. And so he came, and all the little brothers and sisters were around. I introduced him to your grandmother, and she kept looking at me. I kept looking down, and I was so nervous. And after he left, she said, he likes children. I like him. I'm going to allow you to see him. That was it. Mm-hmm.
Beautiful.
And we started our journey.
Yes, just as teenagers, still learning yourselves and then learning each other at the same time.
Yes.
Got it. Yes. Sean, anything you wanted to add? Because I could go on just asking questions for ongoing, but I want to make sure that we kind of flow with it together.
I'm over here smiling, listening to the first half of this love story. And let me just say, first and foremost, this is Sean Garvey speaking. I want to say to both you, Mr. and Mrs. Blackmon, that it is a true honor to speak to the both of you for the very first time. And I happen to know Sha'ria from 2013 or 2014. It was one of those years where we came in contact with each other through mutual colleagues in radio broadcasting. And ever since then, she's been a part of our organization slash platform and has held it down for those X amount of years up until this very moment of us doing the podcast together. The two of you have raised a very beautiful, amazing woman of God, of many talents, and I can see where she gets her beauty and everything else from. And I already know she comes from a very talented family that embraces spirituality and all the great things that the Creator has given to all of you, and especially to Sha'ria. So I just want to first and foremost say that, and thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to be a part of the Love and Poetry podcast. I've heard 58 years. Before coming on the podcast today, me and Sha'ria talked offline, and she told me that the two of you been married for more than 50 years, and you confirmed, Miss Blackmon, that it's been 58 years. And in 2021 to this very day, I hear stories about people getting married and divorcing after 6 months of marriage.
Unfortunately.
But before I get to that part of the conversation, I want one of you to illustrate the first day that the two of you locked eyes on each other. Can you tell us what setting it took place in? Was it in a school setting? Was it in a different kind of setting? What kind of setting was it in?
Well, there's not a conflict, but is there, when it comes locking eyes, we both agree that actually we've seen one another among our own friends, face to face. Actually, my wife was not my girlfriend. At that time, there was another man, another young man who was her boyfriend. And she comes to visit to see him at one of my friends' homes. And of course, I somehow knew who she was from 2 years ago, but it wasn't that we locked eyes on one another at that time. I've seen her from a distance. And so that's the first time I seen her, at the front door when I offered her in and asked who, and she said, I had made that statement, "Who are you seeking?" And she always remembered that one. Yes. And so that's the first time we seen one another. And most likely that was really the true connection. Yet alone, I did not commit myself consciously, to knowing, other than that she was someone that was supposed to be somebody else's friend, so a relationship too.
Yes. And when I rung the doorbell and your daddy answered, he said, "Whom are you seeking?" Then I knew who he was, because he has one brother and they look just alike with the high cheekbones. And I knew I was 15 at the time, but 2 years earlier, I had seen someone that I'd never seen before, because we were the younger sisters, myself and several other girls that I was raised up with. But I seen someone standing across the street in 1959, and I said, "Well, who is that?" And he was standing so erect, like a soldier. And I didn't ask any questions, but I just said, "Who is that?" Right? So fast forward 2 years to when I ring the doorbell and he answers the doorbell and we make eye contact. I knew who it was. I said, "That's Raymond's brother. That's Jimmy Blackmon." And that was it. And all of a sudden, my crush that I had on this other person, I didn't have the crush anymore. So that was it. So then I went to my sister-in-law to be. My brother had married her. That at that time, you would have relationships and they would pick you. And in most cases, most of us married our first crush.
Mm.
Your daddy wasn't my first crush. He was my first love, and I was his first love because he had had girlfriends and crushes, but I was his first crush, and he was my first crush, or my first
Mhm.
love.
Yeah.
So then that was it. So I went to my sister-in-law to Beeks, and my brother married her the next year. And I said, I asked about your daddy. She said, oh no, he's too mature for you, Sherry. No. That. And I said, well, okay. She said, plus you like so-and-so. I said, no, I don't like him no more. So I had quit him. That crush was over. That's where it was. Girls used to have a crush every week, every other month. And so
Mm-hmm.
that's how it started. And once
All
I
right.
talked to him for the first time, and he told me how he felt about faith and religion, I knew he was the one.
Beautiful. And so that leads me into attraction. And of course, you know that, like you said, you lock eyes, and there's a saying that the eyes are the window to the soul, and taking that journey and moving forward. But we have to have that attraction there for it to at least start, right? So in what you're saying, mommy, there were qualities in daddy that was essential to you, and he reflected that back to you, and that's really helped you all to start creating that connection with each other. Growing up, you all were very affectionate with each other. And so I remember that as a child, we know it's a little thing that I would push you all away from each other when you would hug and kiss. Because I was a little selfish thing, and I wanted all the loving, and it was like yucky, you know, that my parents were hugging and kissing. But as I grew up, I knew the importance of demonstrating affection and attention, and really showing that you care for someone in that way. So tell us a little bit about, how do you keep the romance going in terms of your relationship throughout the years and even now?
Patience. It still takes
Mhm.
patience. I always love him, but I don't always like him.
Yeah.
Okay. And at the beginning of the marriage, the first year, because he treated me like a little doll baby, you know, the first year before we married. And he was so patient. But then once we married, see, we were in the military. He sent for me that first year. And that first year when I got to know him, then he would raise his voice, and he wasn't patient all the time. And so that's when I really learned that you have to be patient, and you have to be forgiving. That's how I learned to be patient. Because if I hadn't learned, then the marriage wouldn't have worked. He was always loving, but he wasn't always patient.
Yes, because we're human and we're fallible. So of course
Yes.
and you know, that's an essential thing as we look at marriage and the health of a marriage and success, and being able to connect with the positives of a person, but also their flaws, and knowing that every moment, every experience of it is being able to have that balance. And you know, that's what I learned growing up from being in the Blackmon household, as you as my parents, is that you all demonstrated that we can love one another, we can talk about problems, we can deal with them, but at the same time we can accept each other's shortcomings as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mhm. I want to interject real quick and say, and just piggyback on something that the two of you said regarding patience, because I hear that word all the time, of it being an important thing, a necessity to keeping a relationship consistent and ongoing, is you have to have a lot of patience. But I also hear that communication is the key to keeping a relationship strong and tight and consistent as well. Is that the case also when it comes
Yes.
to communication?
Yeah. The the main thing is always be honest with one another. Try to open up. Always struggle. It, man has and now I'm talking about gender. Man has a somewhat problem of being able to communicate what he truly inside of him feel when it comes to the opposite sex, his partner, even though it is his partner, because he's living two worlds say we would want to say today out in the street, but out into the environment. He's a man of protection. So there are things that he have to always hold back on. So therefore he has to be ready to interact with his mate, his wife, to be able to communicate and express his inner feelings when he truly feels that way, and how he really want to present himself towards her, to keep his relationship honest and open. So that's, yeah, that is very essential and important.
Great. Going back to those key elements that what I hear, I want us to have that common denominator of patience, forgiveness, communication, understanding is something key ingredient I would call when it comes to what your 58 years have looked like in terms of your marriage, and being able to pass that on to those of us in different stages of relationships, even leading up to longer relationships. I'd like to hear a little bit more, because we can say the word, patience, we can say the word forgiveness, but how do you all apply it in your relationship? And I want to hear from my mom and dad, starting with what does even patience look like? Even if you could give us an example of how you display that to one another.
Sometimes patience says, not saying a thing.
Yeah.
Not saying a thing. And know that you cannot change anyone. No matter how much you love someone, you cannot change them. You can only change yourself.
Beautiful. I love that.
I notice I said when she said that, because that's the same thing I have been saying to a few people for the longest. You can have communication there in the relationship or in the marriage, but you cannot change that individual for what you want them to be. They have to be able to change themselves. And I'm so glad that Ms. Blackmon was able to echo that. I don't think a lot of us get that in today's society of marriages. I hear it all the time. I hear stories of, oh, I tried to tell this person 1,000 times not to do this, not to do that. And I would reply, well, have you taken into consideration that's just who they are? So you have to take that into account. For those who are just tuning in to the Love and Poetry podcast with Sha'ria Thomas and Sean Garvey, we are talking to Sha'ria's parents, who we have on the podcast. And today's theme is the marriage life. And I want Sha'ria Thomas to take a moment to reintroduce her parents for those who are just jumping on the podcast for the first time or for the third time, since this is our third episode.
Yes, most definitely. We have here with us today the Honorable Mr. and Mrs. James and Sharon Blackmon, and they are my parents of 58 years. They call me Zuleika because that is my first name. Of course, I go by Sha'ria, have since college years professionally, but I'm so thankful that they are joining us today and giving their insight, information, inspiration, motivation to having a healthy, happy, harmonious, yet, dealing with the issues, dealing with the conflict, having the patience. And that is what they are teaching us and providing to us today.
Yes, patience, wisdom, understanding, communication. Let's talk about the day in the life of you two. Let's talk about the first thing that the two of you do together when you wake up in the morning to it's time for the two of you to call it a night. Let's talk about the first day that you all do together.
The first thing we do together as husband and wife is we make salat or prayer. We make prayer together. That's what we do. That's how we start our day. Yep. And Quranic reading. Yes.
And part of that role, normally I should be the one to wake up, but I'm always the last one to go to. I'm the last one to go to sleep at night. So now you're going to hear the end and the beginning, or the beginning to the end. So my wife actually gets up, we set the time, and she get up before me to let me know the time, because we have a given time, a set time every day. It's not just any time in the morning. It's a set time before sunrise at dawn that we make our prayer. So she gets me up, she does that, and was her routine. We work together with them, but of course we have different routines, different roles to play. So I get up and with her and lead prayer, we go through that. We do our reading. If I don't do it then, I do it later on. And that's the first part. We actually, by being up like that, we are thankful in our retirement years that I don't have to stay up to go to work somewhere. I have other duties, but that is not being, obligated to punching the clock or, seeing to be in with the labor part of organizational labor, working, going out to work. So, and your mother, she has her routine. So I'm gonna let her express some of those things, but that's some of it. And when he was asking for what we do during the day, there's several things that I'm always doing: running, making chores, of picking up things that is needed for the house, and going around and make sure the security and the upkeep, maintenance of the home, outside and inside.
Okay.
Yes. And my husband, he goes back. I go back too. And, this time of year, we go back to sleep. I go back to sleep for an hour or so after, and my husband goes back for maybe 2 to 2.5 hours, because I can't stay up so long anyway. So I go to sleep, but it's hard for him to go to bed. So when it's time for bed for me, he's wide awake. I'm ready for bed. And then when it's time to get up, of course, he's diligent because he has to get up for salat, for prayer. But after that, he goes back to sleep, maybe several hours, and then I'll go back for an hour or so. And then when we start our day, he loves a big breakfast every Sunday morning, but during the week, toast will do. So on Sunday, every Sunday morning, like this morning, we had pancakes for a meal. And then I saved some batter to make him pancakes another day in the week. But other than that, in between, he has toast. He loves toast and jam and coffee. And I'll do oatmeal or we do lemon water together daily. I did it for years, and he would not do lemon water.
I remember that. I remember that.
I could barely get him to get 8 ounces in of water. But
it's been years.
But it's been years since then, because we drink. So like it knows, we're water drinkers. But our first 16 ounces is lemon water. So he's so good at it. He just squeezes us fresh lemon for the water every day.
Yay, Daddy.
Yeah. So he's come a long way. So you always learn. I still learn from my husband. I still learn from my husband. And I still appreciate the marriage, but it still takes patience. Don't ever forget that. And don't ever lose patience with your mate.
And let's go there in terms of when you do lose patience, because as again, we are human. Yeah. And and growing up, that I could say I'm so thankful that in the, like you say, you learn from each other. The personalities of who you are, mommy, and who you are, daddy, are very different in terms of how even you listen and even you communicate. I can even see that. And I saw that even growing up. When it comes to dealing with situations that are conflicting, when you don't agree, tell us a little bit, and even what advice would you give to newlyweds and even couples that are deciding to have a lifelong relationship and they want to have the essentials that it takes to have a healthy relationship. Tell us what advice you would get on being able to deal with conflict when patience is lost at times.
Well, I know as a man, it's sometimes men want to have their way or have this last say so, or just dominate, just control. But the best way is to try and refrain from that. And if you get into such that something that is heated, find something else to do so that you can cool down and have a better insight on what it is. And that'll allow your relationship will come to a consensus and to try to find conciliation once again. This is not always good because sometimes you actually have to sit down and talk it over.
Yeah.
That's the best thing is to try to say, okay, one of the parties or both of them have to say, we have a problem, we need to sit down and sit at the table and say, you talk over your problems there. But if you can't, it's best to just walk away and do something else. And then that individual, whoever, whether it be the male or the female, you can put your consciousness or your mind to something else that will calm your emotional state down.
Yes.
So
very good. Most definitely. Thank you, Daddy. Yes. That is something that I'll let you go in a minute, Sean.
Sure.
As a therapist, I deal with couples and that's a commonality. And even when I was married myself, this sense of you have to learn yourself and be understanding of yourself, and at the same time be willing to yield to win when it comes to your partner. And I'm thankful that each of you demonstrated that. Of course, you lost your temper at times, it happened, but you knew how to be able to regroup and not allow it to escalate to where it was disrespectful. That's one thing I never saw you all, even when you may say, not really call each other out of your name disrespectfully, but say something that was short in temper. It was never really disrespectful. That respect was always maintained. And I know that that's essential when it comes to your marriage that you demonstrated in just any healthy relationship as well. Sean, did you want to add to that?
Oh, no, I was just waiting for them to respond to your assessment. But I wanted to actually ask a few more questions before we let the two of you go, because me and Sha'ria, we have a few more questions to ask you. And I feel like these questions these additional questions that we're getting ready to ask you are relevant to the marriages or the marriage life that's happening right now. When I engage in conversations with people, whether they have been married before or never been married before, they say that the two biggest things that can destroy a marriage is infidelity and the economic aspect of a marriage. I want to get the two of you's take on, let's talk about the economic aspect for a moment, because I find that to be very important. But let's say how important is the financial aspect in a marriage, especially when two people are getting ready to go into the next chapter of their lives, of being one with each other, being committed and going through the process, but then the economic aspect really comes into play, whether you are dealing with somebody who makes more money than you, or, life happens, you get a nice house, you get a big house.
We got knocked out.
Uh-oh, Sean.
Sean got knocked out.
Yeah.
Okay.
So he froze for a minute.
Froze. Yeah, that happens.
Yes. So basically just ensuring that we want to connect that as what he was saying is just give us your take as it relates to how impactful or even how you think that uh, economic in terms of just how finances can affect your relationship and how it has affected your relationship in any way, if it has.
Yes, finances can affect the relationship. I've spoken with people who have actually divorced over it. And you must sit down and discuss your finances, whether you disagree or not, and you must compromise and you must make adjustments. Just like in every other situation in the marriage is very important.
Yeah, of course, you come from a family of 9 children, and it is a struggle when you get into the job market and the income that you have to make to survive and feed and shelter and clothe your family, your children. I'm of course I come from a concept of first a man have to be the provider. Now, of course, today is man and woman. I understand the society has moved away from that. We look from the income of our spouse, whether it be husband or wife, as an additional income in order. So with your mother later on, she went out into the workforce and she provided and gave more income towards our family. And it helped us a whole lot to advance and provide, to have a better provisions and coverage for our family. I see Sean is going to be coming.
Yeah, he's back. There we go.
And and I would like to say that I was home for the first 25 years. I was in the home. And then I went into the workplace for 10 years and it helped.
Yes, yes. That is true, I would say, give and take in terms of how you, mommy and daddy, were able to, we say roles, the role of the male and the female in a marriage, but you were able to adjust and switch roles as needed and be able to find some balance to meet each other and be okay with taking on more, even, at times when mommy, you were working a bit more. I know there was a time where daddy, I don't know if you were laid off for some time or something, but things I can imagine became a bit tight financially, but we still moved forward. It didn't change in terms of how I know I was affected. So I didn't feel the impact, but I can imagine how stressful or it was for you all to navigate that together. So Sean is back, I believe.
Yes.
So Sean,
Yes. Thank goodness.
Yes, you made it back.
Yeah, sometimes these things happen in both radio and podcast. I am back on. We was experiencing some technical difficulties, but before, actually, before I got cut off, rather, I was asking you about the financial aspect of the marriage, and I'm glad that Sha'ria touched on that while two of you were talking. But I want to switch gears from the financial aspect to now the infidelity part of a marriage that can destroy a marriage or can take a marriage into a different direction. To this very day, I've heard stories about people who have been in marriages and they experience infidelity. They may have been the person that got cheated on, or it may be the person that cheated on their spouse or someone outside of the marriage. And for the two of you to be in a marriage for 58 years, what all did it take for the two of you to sustain or to refrain from adultery or infidelity?
This is what it takes: forgiveness, patience, and compromise. It takes forgiveness. This is what it takes. You have to make a marriage work.
I would like to say it. I think what she's just saying about as in general, all of that. But at the same time, I want to add to that for everyone that you have to have a faith-based rooted belief. Now, with us, we have a faith that even allows males to have more than one wife. But we talk and express overly, and I listen to my wife. I have never wanted another wife, not to say that. But at the same time, I realized I had an option if I wanted to have that as part of my overall structure as a man, having the right according to my faith. But that didn't matter. That does not give me the green light, so to use that word, to go out and have a roaming eye looking for someone. So I don't believe in the sense that you have a right in that manner. And when it comes to fidelity, adultery, we are definitely against any of that in the first place. So the patience is, if that ever arrived, then we both have to look at it and express how we feel about it. I don't know if that makes any sense in the sense that we were talking about the adultery and fornication, but no, that's not something that we ever had to face. And I don't believe any marriage should even venture in that manner, because that's a commitment between the two in order to keep the bond of trust.
Mm-hmm.
That's the only way you can keep that bond of trust.
Yeah.
Yes.
And it goes back to communication that we talked about earlier, is sitting down and communicating with your partner, with your spouse, about things that may go awry or may go wrong not only in a relationship, but in a marriage. There comes a time where the intimacy is not there like it was before, or things have changed now. Whenever you come home, she doesn't do the things that what she used to do early on, or his mood has changed. I think that you have to, at some point in time in a marriage, have a conversation, communication with that person and say, hey, honey, or hey, babe, here's what I've been feeling lately. Or it may not even be negative things or things that will be somewhat of a concern, but it can be fun things like, hey, honey, let's try this, to do something different that we never done before as a married couple. So it all just goes back to communication, like Sha'ria and everyone else has explained earlier.
It does.
Mm-hmm.
It does, because my husband, when I met him, he was always busy in his family with his mother, his aunts and grandmothers. He would fix their plumbing. He would do all this as an 18, 19-year-old boy. And then when we married, and then we went into the military for a couple of years, and we came out, we bought our home. He would be fixing something at our house in the bathroom, and they would say, well, my bathroom needs fixing. So he always worked overtime and extra time. But it came to the point that I see my husband was tired. And I knew it was time for him. I said, you can continue to do whatever you want to do, but not outside the home. Only not, in retirement, because he wanted to go and work and it was time for him to leave the workplace, to leave those. He's a journeyman and a machinist and an industrial mechanic all in one. So he can do all that. He can fix a car, he can fix a washing machine, he can fix any.
Jack of all trades.
Oh, okay. So I said,
yes,
you move at your own pace, but he had to come out of those factories. He had to stop that. And I had to really talk to him to make him see, no, we can make it. We're not raising children anymore. And because of that, he did stop that, but he's still busy, but only on his own recognizance, nothing else. Nowhere else.
And I want to add to that part about stimulation. What we do, my wife has always been one to try to keep us stimulated, when it comes to sentiments and feelings. she likes to bring out different parts out of me, so she knows how. And that's what a relationship has to do. How can you bring that better part out of that person?
Yes, yes.
You know what I mean?
Most
To make them to show that. And so she's able to do that. And then I realized that then I have to do that because I want that.
Mhm.
You know, you want it. And so we do that off and on, you know, tell one another we love one another, hug one another. Those are important ingredients to keep that going. Just, you know, let's have a night out. Let's go out. Let's go do something together. You know, those are the things that we do to keep it going. Not just, you know, the daily round out routine of things. Let's change it up a little bit. You know, so that's what we do in order to keep our love life heated, passionate at all times.
Yes, yes. And I tell you, you can still, if you around them, Sean, you can still feel it. It's still there. And
I see it.
so it's, yes, the spark is still there after all those years. And it's, you can tell it's real love.
Yeah.
Yes.
We only have a few minutes left in the podcast. And for those that are watching, whether you are thinking about taking your spouse to the next level with you, or if you're a millennial and you watching this and you say, hey, I want to tell my significant other that I want to grow old with this person. We now live in a time that's different from the time that the two of you were in, where relationships and marriages were just as important as it still is to this very day. Surviving through the era of Jim Crow and going through the era of the civil rights movement, whether it came from the great Honorable Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. or the Honorable Malcolm X. You know, I've been told before that during that time, you had no choice but to stick together as a Black couple or stick together as a Black married couple. Let me make sure I put that in there. Also put that context in there. A Black married couple, because it was the only way to survival when all we had at that particular time was each other. And then fast forward today in the 21st century, people want to get married quick. They want to get married quick. They want to say Mr. and Mrs. just for either the attention or because everyone else is doing it. What is your advice to today's philosophy when it comes to marriages? And when I say today's philosophy, I'm talking about the philosophy behind the reason why people are getting married faster and quicker, and why they have to get married to this very day, as opposed to the era that you two were brought in at that particular time.
When you're talking about philosophy, when it comes to concept of marriage, it should always be the same. But today's society has in the experimental stage. Man is in the experimental stage. Relationships are just relationships. They're not marriages. And so first, we have to first correct that institute. That's an institute. And I believe that that's why we have an in and out of relationship from marriage to back again, starting all over again. So I believe that that's where we have lost our way. Our roots of staying together, binding together, understanding one another. Those are the things that actually would make strong family units. And so this is something that we have to face as a society today. That's all I could kind of like give at this time on that.
Yes, that's good enough, Daddy. Thank you, because what you're saying basically is essentially the separation from relationship and true marriage is commitment, is what I hear. And if that foundation in terms of committing through it all, that you decide when you're grappling with the imperfections, the flaws, the troubled times, you've made, each person in that marriage has made the commitment to stick and stay and move through it together as a team, as a unit, as one. And so I think that that is a good place and a good, I'm big on themes and just a connector, that really helps us to take away. And that's what I hear. I hear you saying, and all the other ingredients that mommy has sprinkled out as we have talked about as well. So thank you. Thank you for
Thank
that.
you. Thank you.
And I have one more question before we conclude. I just have one more question.
Okay.
We also have people that are listening right now and say that marriage is just a piece of paper. If you can fill in the blank and say marriage is for the fill in the blank, go ahead and fill in the blank. Marriage is for the what?
For two people to come together, to love each other and express each other, to be patient with each other, and to forgive each other. That's it. That's what you have to do. Human beings aren't perfect. Since we're not perfect, we have to have these little jewels that we use to keep the marriage together.
I'll say this about marriage. Marriage is a commitment, a development for man and woman. God has given us a development to be our complete self. There is a purpose for marriage. And that is why that institute has been established way thousands of years. A unity of man and woman together, creating a family and creating a community.
Yes.
And in that is important.
Yes.
For creation. Yes.
Most definitely. I have to say something to that, Sean. I'm sorry.
No,
because just
that was a poem by itself. By the way, Sha'ria, that was a poem by itself.
That was a poem by itself, right? There we go.
usually end the podcast with a poem, but that's poetry within itself.
That is
so go ahead,
poetry
Sha'ria.
within itself. Yes. And my dad is my dad is a poet. My mom has told me how my dad would write to her those love letters. So hey, I get that from him, both of them actually, because both of them are great in terms of.
Can we have your father do a love poem? Can we have your father do a love poem?
Oh, don't put my dad on a spot like that. I'm not gonna even let you do that to him.
I mean, all you gotta do is just stare into his wife's eyes and just say 3 or 4 sentences. That's it. Let's make this official.
You don't have to, Daddy, because we don't have to prove anything. We already know. But I wanted to just, on what both of my parents said as it relates to the what marriage is, and being able to bring it full circle is the sense of commitment and the ingredients of forgiveness, patience, communication, understanding. And those are the essentials that we have talked about. Being able to have faith as the foundation first, and being able to know that the actual sacredness of marriage has been long standing. And when Sean talks about how it's viewed differently, and some may say it's just paper, but the foundation and the sacrament of marriage is in the development of the human being, that as the female component and the masculine component coming together, it brings completion in terms of, we bring a sense of, I would say, reason as the masculine, the male, and the female brings in the emotion. And just as Daddy said, that mommy brings out those good parts that it helps to reshape you. And I know that you do the same for mommy, is in her part of her emotions, being able to bring out the reasoning of the logical side that, as females, that is not our essential primary in terms of the makeup of who we are. So that balance that it brings, and as it relates to the growth of the development, the journey of the soul. So I'm so thankful that mommy and daddy, you've come today and you've shared with us. And hopefully it helps those that listen and they can take away and know the importance and really the respect of a marriage. So thank you again. I love you.
Love you too. Thanks for inviting us.
Thank
You're
you.
welcome.
Thank you for coming on the show, and we wish you 58 more years
Yes.
of marital bliss.
Yeah.
Yes.
Absolutely. All right. Sha'ria Thomas, thank you for bringing your parents on for the very first time, Love and Poetry Podcast.
You're welcome.
And for more information, you can go to beatbreakradiofm.com. And we also are happy to announce that we do have an email address in place if you want to email us your comments and your testimonial stories, or if you want us to share anything you want us to share with our listening audience, you can go to the Gmail, love and poetry podcast at gmail.com. That's love and AEND poetry podcast at gmail.com, and we will respond within 7 to 10 business days. If there's anything you want us to share, just send us an email to love and poetry podcast at gmail.com. And you can follow me at Sean Garvey on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Sean Garvey ATL. And where can people follow you at, Sha'ria?
At I am Sha'ria Thomas on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter as well. And you can visit me at my website at sha'riathomas.com.
There it is, folks. So until we meet again next time, episode 4, we are definitely looking forward to the next episode where we talk about the other side, not to give too much away, but we will have a woman who recently been divorced, and she is going to talk about the bounce back life after marriage on episode 4 of the Love and Poetry Podcast. Until then, you all have a great Sunday and enjoy the rest of your week.
Thank
Take
you.
care.
Take care.